Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Major General John Pete Johnson, Commanding General, U.S. Army Training Center and Fort Jackson, and Command Sergeant Major Lamont Christian, Post Command Sergeant Major, welcome to Fort Jackson's Hall of Fame induction ceremony and centennial lecture. We sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to share this momentous occasion with us. At this time, we would like to welcome our distinguished guests. Our guest speaker for today's lecture series, the Honorable Steve Benjamin, Mayor of the great capital city of Columbia, South Carolina. The Honorable Beth Bernstein, State Representative for Richland County. Miss Sue McLeese, spouse of former civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army and Fort Jackson Hall of Fame member, Mr. Ike McLeese. Major General Van McCarthy, Assistant Adjutant General, South Carolina National Guard. Major General Retired Steve Siegfried, former Fort Jackson Commanding General and Hall of Fame inductee. Major General Retired George Goldsmith, Reserve Ambassador and Fort Jackson Hall of Fame member. Mr. Scott Gillette, Congressional Staffer for Senator Lindsey Graham. Brigadier General Retired Mitch Michener, former Fort Jackson Deputy Commanding General. Brigadier General Retired John Finnan and Miss Finnan, Retired Air Force General. Brigadier General Retired Bill Bouknight and guests. Dr. Ronald Rames, President, Midlands Technical College. Mr. Carl Blackstone, President and CEO, Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Henry Baskins, Vice President, Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce. Mr. John Singerling, Chairman of the Board, Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce. And Fort Jackson Hall of Fame members, Mr. Kevin Schwedo and Miss Sylvia Butler. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to our distinguished guests, it is with great pleasure to announce that this afternoon we have our very special guests, inductees to our 4th annual Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame was established 4 years ago, allowing us to recognize and honor persons who have made positive, lasting, and significant contributions to Team Jackson. These individuals, former officers, non-commissioned officers, and civilians, were nominated and evaluated by a panel that scrutinized the significance of each inductee's impact to the overall good of the largest initial entry training center in our Army, and each was found worthy of the recognition and honor of induction. Inductees this afternoon will receive the coveted Fort Jackson Hall of Fame medallion and pin, which will be placed on them by the Commanding General, as well as being honored with a permanent display in the command area of the Fort Jackson headquarters. We will first recognize retired Chaplain and Lieutenant Colonel Lathrop Palmer Utley. He is posthumously being inducted onto the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. Chaplain Utley served the U.S. Army for nearly 40 years. While in the Army, Chaplain Utley traveled the world from Vietnam to Korea to Germany and was stationed at various posts in the continental United States. For many years, Chaplain Utley served as the priest to the Fort Jackson Episcopal Service, even while retired, and later became the liturgical service pastor, ministering to even larger groups of members of the Fort Jackson community. His pastoral presence extended beyond his ministry at the USACHCS to Fort Jackson at large through his pastoral duties. When the U.S. Army Chaplain Center and School moved to Fort Jackson in 1996, retired Chaplain Utley was the first person to volunteer to assist the center and school as a media support asset or in whatever way he could. He rapidly became an integral and important part of the school's daily life and ethos. Chaplain Utley developed and managed the Chaplain School Store, offering Chaplain Corps related products and clothing that became a significant morale booster for the student, staff, and chaplain corps members everywhere. He willingly took the students' store to many regional chaplain corps events around the world. He became a beloved and respected mentor to the new chaplains in training and the school's faculty. He offered his wisdom and counsel and became the confidant and mentor to a generation of chaplains. He was known as both the Friar of the USA CHCS and the chaplain to the chaplains. The words that describe Chaplain Utley can be summed up as follows. He loved his God, he loved his family, he loved his country, he loved the Army, and he loved the chaplain corps. He also loved soldiers, and it showed every single day. It is because of these accomplishments and his love of soldiers that he is therefore inducted into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. General Johnson and Command Sergeant Major Christian will now come forward. Our next inductee, retired Major General Stephen Siegfried. Sir, would you please come forward? Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Steve Siegfried served the U.S. Army for 34 years, earning multiple awards and commendations. Highlights from his extensive assignment history includes overseas tours in Panama, Germany, Great Britain, and 2 combat tours in Vietnam. His selfless and dedicated service to our nation earned him 2 Distinguished Service Medals, the Silver Star, the Soldier's Medal, the Legion of Merit, 3 Bronze Stars, and 2 Purple Hearts. He commanded Fort Jackson from December 1991 to March 1994. Major General Siegfried just celebrated 55 years of marriage to his wife, Maggie. Once out of uniform, Major General Siegfried continued to mentor our soldiers and leaders by conducting countless leader professional development sessions on Fort Jackson and other military installations in South Carolina, and as a regular volunteer instructor at the Commander First Sergeant course. His wisdom and mentorship is lauded by all ranks who have had the privilege of knowing him and learning from him. Additionally, Major General Siegfried is one of our greatest advocates and local ambassadors with extensive service in the local community. With an extensive list of accomplishments in the local community, some highlights include Vice Chairman of the Honor Flight for South Carolina, serving on the Board of Directors for the United Way in the Midlands, member of the Capital City Rotary, member of the Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce, member of the Association of the United States Army, a regular volunteer at a local food bank, and many, many other service organizations and charities. Major General Siegfried and his wife created a beautiful community garden in Chapin, South Carolina, for grieving parents who have lost a child. He and his wife were inspired to create the garden after the murder of their son, Benjamin Thomas Siegfried, in 1988. We need a place to go on Father's Day and Mother's Day and birthdays and death days. And when the grief gets on you, you just have a hard time getting it off. And going to a graveyard is not all that happy of an event. So he and his wife created something different, something serene, quiet, and an appropriate place to go and remember your child. Major General Siegfried has ensured that any Fort Jackson or other military family who wishes to memorialize their child on a brick paver at the garden can do so at no cost. It is because of these accomplishments and his love of soldiers that he is therefore inducted into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, our next inductee is retired chaplain, Colonel Samuel J.T. Boone. Sir, would you please come up? Chaplain Samuel Boone served the U.S. Army for 38 years. He is a former commandant of the United States Army Chaplain Center and School at Fort Jackson. His other assignments include overseas tours in Germany and Korea. He proudly wears the Defense Superior Service Medal, 3 Legion of Merits, and the Bronze Star Medal, just to name a few. Chaplain Boone has and continues to serve the Fort Jackson Columbia community. He long served as pastor of the On-Post Memorial Chapel service. He is heavily involved with the Military Chaplains Association, to include serving on the MCA Chaplains National Executive Committee as secretary for the South Carolina chapter, MCA's largest chapter, and directs the Fort Jackson National Cemetery Ministry efforts on their behalf. Chaplain Boone's efforts made and continue to make a profound and lasting impact on the Chaplain Corps, the Army, and most specifically, the Fort Jackson community. He has impacted countless service members, civilians, and their families for the good and betterment of all. Chaplain Boone is a fearless leader and strategic visionary with an unbounded commitment to God and country. It is because of these accomplishments and his love of soldiers that he is therefore inducted into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, our next inductee is retired Colonel Craig Curry. Would you please come up, sir? Colonel Craig Curry served in the U.S. Army for 30 years. He is a former deputy commanding officer at Fort Jackson. His other assignments include overseas tours in Germany, Korea, and Haiti, and a combat tour in Iraq. He proudly wears the Distinguished Service Medal, 2 Legion of Merits, and the Bronze Star Medal, just to name a few. Colonel Curry stays engaged in activities supporting soldiers and family members. He has participated in the Veterans Police Academy under the Department of Mental Health for 6 years, leads efforts with Midlands Veterans Engagement Council under the Dorn and Southeast Veterans Administration, and has been an active board member for the Midlands Consortium for Homeless for 4 years, and has direct participation on the Military Affairs Committee for the Columbia Chamber of Commerce for over 6 years. His efforts to take care of Fort Jackson's extended family is notable. As the Chief Executive Officer of the Transitions Homeless Center, he has a 24-hour support requirement for total bed capacity on 260 individuals, 8% of which are veterans at any given time. It is because of these accomplishments and his love of soldiers that he is therefore inducted into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, our next inductee is retired Colonel Angelo Perry. Would you please come up, sir? Colonel Angelo Perry served the U.S. Army for 29 years. He is a former Chief of Staff at Fort Jackson. His other assignments include overseas tours in Germany, the Philippines, and combat tours in Korea and Vietnam. He proudly wears 3 Legion of Merits and the Combat Infantry Badge, just to name a few. Colonel Perry is a great ambassador for Fort Jackson. He stays engaged in activities that support Fort Jackson and the surrounding community. He served as the president of the Retired Officers Association, TROA, which is currently known as the Military Officers Association of America, South Carolina chapter. During his time as president, he was one of those initiating the VA National Cemetery on Fort Jackson. For over 25 years, Colonel Perry served on the Military Affairs Committee of the Chamber of Commerce. He has a key role on the Issues Subcommittee. This committee addresses quality of life issues that sometimes impact Fort Jackson or the soldiers on Fort Jackson. Colonel Perry would provide vital input and afterwards would backbrief the Fort Jackson leadership on these issues. Colonel Perry was the lead plaintiff on behalf of over 2,000 retired officers from all services to recoup South Carolina income tax erroneously paid. It is because of these accomplishments and his love of soldiers that he is therefore inducted into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, our next inductee is Mr. Daniel Hennigan. Sir, would you please come up? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hennigan is a 2016 Fort Jackson Hall of Fame selectee. Today we are inducting him into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame because he was unavailable to attend last year's Hall of Fame induction ceremony. After serving 10 years in the U.S. Army, Mr. Hennigan was medically retired. His assignments include an overseas tour in Grenada. Mr. Hennigan has worked selflessly and tirelessly on behalf of Fort Jackson for many years. He has played a key role in multiple capacities supporting Fort Jackson, soldiers and families across the state of South Carolina. Some of the many contributions include executive board member of the Gateway to the Army 100th Anniversary Project, the lead on the 9/11 Memorial, connecting the community to our military, chairman of the American Flags for Soldiers organization. He has worked to improve AUSA Corporation sponsorship to the benefit of our soldiers. And he has been instrumental in working with the Governor's Office and the Military Department of South Carolina to reduce veteran unemployment in South Carolina. Mr. Hennigan is an ambassador for the Army, Fort Jackson, and the military community. His superior performance and dedicated service is reflected in his care and concern for those he served within his 35 years of professional military service and service to the Fort Jackson community. It is because of these accomplishments and his love of soldiers that he is therefore inducted into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, today we conclude the Fort Jackson's lecture series honoring Fort Jackson's 100th-year legacy of training the best soldiers in the world by looking forward to the next 100 years. The relationship between the City of Columbia and Camp Jackson were founded on mutual principles of cooperation and respect. Looking toward the future, this relationship will continue to grow, fostering an even stronger bond between Fort Jackson and the surrounding community. Today, we are honored to have with us Mayor Steve Benjamin here to talk about Columbia's current and future efforts with Fort Jackson that will reflect the anticipated continuation of efforts between Columbia and the fort. He serves as the 44th Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and was elected to that position in a record turnout on April 20th, 2010, and re-elected by a 30% margin in November 2013. In addition to serving as mayor, Mr. Benjamin is a practicing attorney and serves as chairman for Municipal Bonds for America. He was elected in 2012 as a trustee with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and was elected president of the African American Mayors Association in May 2015. Having taken office in July 2010, Mayor Benjamin's administration has been characterized by strong leadership and vision demonstrated by multiple years of budget surpluses, falling crime, a nearly 50% reduction in unemployment, and over $1.3 billion in new downtown investment since 2014 alone. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mayor Benjamin.
Not yet? Now we are. Now we are. Now we are. Thank you, Sergeant. I want to first of all thank the Sergeant for reading my introduction just like I wrote it. That's always very important to every elected official, especially during an election year. Is that right, James and Beth? I will tell you this, and I promise not to be incredibly long. I spend a great deal of my time, as so many of you in this room do, with our children from all across this community. I believe that my responsibility is not just the two girls who live in my house and who look just like and act just like my wife, but it's the children all across this entire community. And I've had been blessed to visit almost 200 schools since I've been mayor of Columbia. I went over to E. Taylor Elementary. They asked the little guy to write 4 lines, Kevin, about Julius Caesar. He wrote that Julius Caesar was a general. Julius Caesar lived a long time ago. Julius Caesar gave long speeches. They killed him. All right, so I'm not going to give a very long speech. I'm going to stay well within General the confines of the time that has been allotted for the mayor of Columbia. I have been blessed, and I consider it a blessing to serve as a leader of the city I love for the last 7.5 years, to work alongside so many of you in this room who work to make Columbia and the Midlands a great place that it is, the most military-friendly community in the entire country. I want to thank you for that opportunity. It has been a blessing of my life to go around this country, Chaplain, indeed around the world, and to tell people about all the great things that make Columbia what we are. And some of you heard me say this, and it's so true. I tell them that in Columbia, South Carolina, that men still open doors for ladies, that people still do pull over for funerals. I tell them you can still find sweet tea in restaurants. We aren't reticent about thanking God for his many blessings in our lives, and that people still know 2 of the most powerful words in the English language. And those words are very simply, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so often we have to come back to this very place, this incredible post. Pete, I want to thank you and Command Sergeant Major, so Colonel Ellison, and so many of the men and women who have helped me shape my worldview as to what leadership is, for the work that you do, for indeed, we're elected officials, and I won't keep picking on James and Beth. I'm trying to figure there are some other politicians in the room right now, but we've been known to exaggerate a time or two. But when you say that you provide the very blanket of freedom that we sleep under every single day, you provide the security that provides my daughters and young people some type of tangible evidence that the greatest democratic nation in the history of the world is not a fight of fancy, that indeed that we are preparing each and every day right here at Fort Jackson, the greatest fighting force that the world has ever seen, and that these men and women have and will put their lives on the line to protect this great place that we call home. And to come here and just to say the words thank you for all that you do and all that you've done, I'm humbled to have that opportunity. to some degree, to all the ministers in the room, I feel like I'm here preaching to the converted. I don't have to say a whole lot today, and many of you in this room, just as the birth of Camp Jackson was led by business leaders through the Columbia Chamber of Commerce 100 years ago, we've continued to see that connective tissue, that connected strand of leadership through my friend Ike McLeese, who, as a CASA, it's many of you and all of you knew Ike. I would love to say that I volunteered to advocate for Fort Jackson. I volunteered to do a number of different things, but you guys know I was voluntold to do things, just as many of us were, all of us who interface with Ike and his leadership over the years, and see that leadership continue to be sustained by Carl and Susan and Henry and General Goldsmith, and every single opportunity that we have to step up to go and tell our story, Scott, Senator Graham, and Congressman Wilson, Congressman Clyburn, and our entire delegation, Senator Scott, we don't have really much of a selling job. These men and women who lead us on the federal level and provide that leadership every single day know exactly what's happening here on post. But in the interest that some of you are brand new to Columbia, South Carolina, brand new on your visit and your stay at Fort Jackson, I will say this. We know that Fort Jackson provides a $2.3 billion annual economic impact to the Midlands of South Carolina. I say that because this is not just, of course, a Columbia endeavor. We've seen leadership from Columbia, Richland County, Lexington County, our strong leaders in the private sector. And John, I thank you for your leadership, volunteer leadership at leading the chamber right now through Palmetto Health, training soldiers here on 52,000 acres, directly accounting for more than 7,600 jobs, civilian and military, with an annual payroll of over $500 million, impacting our economy every single day. It's almost $1 billion worth of annual procurement activity. Of course, having impact on several industrial sectors all across the Midlands, including $250 million in medical services. We have joint construction projects going on right now, and some upcoming, to the tune of $214 million. Approximately 225,000 people visiting the Midlands annually. So you think about heads in beds and seats in restaurants, and the vibrancy that you see happening downtown and all across the metropolitan area, from downtown all the way out to Lake Murray. We see the impact of Fort Jackson on this community. Statewide, our military community represents 8.4% of the state economy, almost 200,000 jobs, 1 in 12 jobs in our entire state attributed to our military community. We are thrilled to be partnering, Dan, with so many of you on helping to deliver Centennial Park. I believe that Columbia, South Carolina made the first financial commitment, and we are excited to be a partner in this effort with so many of you in this room who are helping lead the charge. We have a bold vision for Columbia, South Carolina, founded March 17, 1786, by an act of the state legislature. Some of you know our history. The merchants of Charleston were debating with the growing business people in the upstate and trying to find a new capital that would represent a capital for all of South Carolina. There was some significant interest, but not a whole lot here in the Midlands in 1786. Some in the Senate, as they were debating the issue, said, well, maybe we should name the new capital Wilderness. They suggested it was in the middle of nowhere. And then the idea said, well, at the combination of the Broad and Saluda Rivers would form the Congaree on the Taylor plantation at the time. We would found a city. The leading name at the time was actually Washington, and the name Columbia won out. Columbia at that time was not just a derivation of the name Columbus, but it also meant freedom. It had a number of other definitions. And Senator John Lewis Gervais of Abbeville said that we hope that the refuge of every land, the refugees of every land would find refuge under the wilderness, under the wings of Columbia, that the oppressed of every land would find refuge under the wings of Columbia. We were meant to be an open city that was welcoming to each and every person of our city, of our country, and our world at that very early time in our history. In order to be that type of city, a city that works still to this day to attract the most talented, educated, and entrepreneurial city in the world, you've got to have the men and women of Fort Jackson helping to provide not just that freedom, but I will say to be intricately and intimately involved in this community. Over the last 7 years, we've had the opportunity to participate in a number of different efforts together, General. We've worked together through triumph, and we've also worked together through tragedy. I will tell you that on October 4th, I remember it well because it's my wife's birthday, on October 4th of 2015, when the 1,000-year event hammered Columbia, South Carolina. I thank God for Fort Jackson. I thank God for the men and women in uniform, partnered arm in arm with our first responders. We worked to deliver services to the people of this city, I believe, well beyond what our expectations were. The quick and decisive and collective behavior and leadership of the men and women who make this post operate and the people across this community didn't only improve our quality of life, but indeed saved lives all across Columbia. We're so thankful for that leadership. We made a practice together in Columbia, South Carolina, the civilian leadership, our business leadership, and the men and women who make up this post of doing what other people said is not possible, would be impossible. Together, we've cut unemployment, yes, by over half. We've revitalized our downtown. We've worked together on justice reform and sustainability. We've worked to create, arm in arm, a great, strong business environment, and we've made historic investments in public safety and infrastructure, all at the very same time having budget surpluses and cutting taxes in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm proud and thankful to have led through this critical period in our city's history. But I will tell you that I believe that the future of our country, the future of our state, and the future of our city is even brighter because we're doing everything together. We will continue to stand arm by arm with our local leadership, with our state leadership, with our national leadership, and with the President of the United States as we continue to invest in the United States military. It is crucial, not just to our local economy. I will make it clear that's not just an economic decision for us, but it is important to our place on the world stage, that we indeed remain the greatest democratic nation in the history of the world. I won't go much longer. I was telling the General and his wife earlier today, I was scrambling because both of my daughters finished elementary school for the year today, and of course, their daddy, the mayor, forgot to put that on his schedule this morning. So I had to rearrange the calendar a little bit and make sure that priorities remain priorities. My 10-year-old Jordan Grace won the Good Citizen Award at her school today. And obviously, as many of you who've dedicated your lives to public service, that means something extra to you, just as it does to her father. I thought that my oldest daughter, our 12-year-old, might get the Comedian of the Year award. Many of you have met my daughter Bethany, and I may have told you the story before. Someone was commenting to her as to how bright she was one day, and she said that she is pretty bright. She said, "I get my looks from my mother and my brains from my father," which I was happy. And then she said, "My mother still has all her brains." All right, so. That being said, I won't go a whole lot longer. I've made a commitment to keep this brief. We're thankful to the men and women and families of Fort Jackson for the leadership that you provide in this community. We're thankful for the security that you provide to the world, preparing the greatest fighting force this world has ever seen. We pledge that for the next 100 years, we'll continue to work side by side with you in advocating before the Congress and standing side by side with you and fighting against any and every brag and effort to reduce the United States military, that we'll work on all the newer, more interesting issues like sustainability and making sure that this post remains the leader that it is. I want to say thank you to you individual men and women. So many of you in this room have committed your lives, both during your service to this country and after you've left the military, to making our cities, our state, a much better place. I want to say thank you for that commitment. I want you to know that each and every day, as we go to work, as I do, and Beth Bernstein and James Smith, as we're making policy decisions about how to make this place better, that we are appreciative, and we thank God for you, and we thank God for your service, and we will continue to work to make sure that together, arm in arm with our Chamber of Commerce, arm in arm with our citizen leadership, arm in arm with Fort Jackson, that we continue to make Columbia, South Carolina, the Greater Midlands, the most military-friendly community in the world. May God bless you.
Thank you, Mayor Benjamin, for that outstanding presentation. Yes.
And I actually remember this before Susan McPherson gave me the evil eye. So, and I am not going to read this entire proclamation, not just in the interest of time, but like many of you, if you see the point size in this, I really can't actually read it. I really can't read it. So this is a proclamation, and I did actually have an opportunity as General and as Pete, Kevin, Lamar, and I were together just a few weeks ago. I had a wonderful music presentation to present a variation of this proclamation. It's my pleasure on behalf of the people of Columbia to name this Fort Jackson 100th Anniversary Day. And again, to say thank you to the men and women who make this place a very special place. God bless you.
Another round of applause for Mayor Benjamin. Ladies and gentlemen, next we are privileged to have Major General John Pete Johnson to enlighten us on the future of Fort Jackson. Major General Johnson assumed command of the U.S. Army Training Center and Fort Jackson as the 50th Commander on 24 June 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Major General Johnson.
The mayor is certainly deserving of that, but not I, okay? He read the bio like I had it too. I crossed it all out, okay? And so I appreciate that introduction. Before the mayor got up to speak, he said, "Do you know his name?" And I thought for a second, I said, "Yes, Sergeant." But I tell you, Mr. Mayor, you're a great teammate and a friend of Fort Jackson, and friend of all military here in South Carolina. I really, really do appreciate your leadership and partnership. And it does make a difference. It really does. Team Jackson and friends of Fort Jackson, especially our Hall of Fame inductees, and certainly, again, our very own Mayor Steve Benjamin. Thank you all for being part of this recognition and lecture series today. as we ponder the future, our first realization must be that regardless of our trajectory moving forward, we will be standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, to include our much cherished community partners of Columbia and the greater Midlands of South Carolina. As we began our centennial celebration, our first order of business actually was to reinvest ourselves back into our own history, the history of Fort Jackson and its enduring legacy for this nation. And Fort Jackson has had tremendous impact, which I sincerely believe rises to the national treasure level of recognition. Think about it. Fort Jackson, which began, as all of you know, as a World War I training base, will have trained over 5 million soldiers, and ready and willing, all of them, to defend this nation and its interests around the world. From the time Fort Jackson was designated as one of the 16 national cantonments in support of that buildup, the post-primary mission has been and remains to transform citizens into soldiers. Today, we train more than half of the soldiers entering basic combat training, to include approximately 2/3 of all of the females, operating on a scale that really deserves context. You gotta place this in context. We train the equivalent of the entire Australian Army every single year. That's just in basic training. And if you include all the other training, finance, Adjutant General Corps, Chaplain, etc., it matches the size of the entire British Army. That is scale, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly feel blessed, and I hope all of you feel the same, to be lucky enough to be present at this time, this auspicious time at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I am certain that General Siegfried, having led the post through its 75th anniversary, knows precisely how lucky we are. And he reminded me of that as soon as I took this guide on. And he started coaching throughout. And sir, with that great counsel, the Association of the United States Army has minted what I think is a very fitting coin for those who will attend our Centennial Ball. And this will be a great personal reminder for all of us. He made sure that I knew that that's what they did on the 75th, all right? And it made a difference, didn't it? All right, well, we're carrying on that great tradition. Please unveil our centennial coin. And Mr. Kevin Suedo and Miss Sylvia Butler, they handed me one here right before we started. All right, this is a big deal, and I really thank you for what the association has done to really, place in some permanence here in this little memorabilia what this 100th year is all about. I think it absolutely captures our legacy. I think it certainly delivers our connection to this great Palmetto State. And through our motto, victory starts here, right here. We'll get better as the speech goes on. Shows that we are ever oriented to the future. So what about the next 100 years? As we look into that crystal ball, what do we see for Fort Jackson? For starters, our future, the future of Fort Jackson, is inextricably tied to the future and fortunes of our Army and this great community. And as we just heard from Mayor Benjamin, we can remain confident on the viability of that great partnership with the City of Columbia and the surrounding communities. So what about our Army? Well, I, for one, am supremely confident that Fort Jackson will continue to play a critical role in building and improving the readiness of the Army as it has for the past 100 years. Of those 16 national cantonments established in 1917, it remains the sole location still transforming citizens into soldiers. Think about that. In the near term, we are already a growth industry with the addition of our 11th Battalion, 439, and we can expect our training mission to grow as our Army grows. over the next year and beyond. We'll just have to wait and see. As we look well beyond that towards the year 2117, which feels like a number you'd see in a sci-fi film, what should we anticipate for basic training and the transformation from citizen to soldier? Let's go ahead and roll a clip. That doesn't happen here in basic training. Now, I'm not sure I'm ready to predict going to a Spartan-like society where we rob our kids' childhoods, okay, not to speak of elementary graduations, to start molding them into soldiers. But who would have predicted where we are today in 1917, or for that matter, on the birth of our Army in 1775? I'm convinced that basic combat training will be shaped by the nature of warfare, of the time, and of our Army's corresponding organizational design and capabilities. We will continue to transform and train our soldiers to meet the needs of our Army and our nation. As we look back to 1775, the Continental Army displayed enduring truths or principles that we continue to see and will remain as guideposts for our Army. And that is that we will remain an Army that defends an idea captured initially in our Declaration of Independence and ultimately in the Constitution of the United States of America. It is what we will continue to swear allegiance to. And it is the this in the Army's motto, this we'll defend. We will remain an Army profession built on trust that embodies a set of values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And exemplifies a warrior ethos: always place the mission first, never accept defeat, never quit, never leave a fallen comrade. We will remain an Army where engaged leadership makes a difference and where the non-commissioned officer corps remains the envy of the armies of the world. We will remain an Army where Schofield's definition of discipline is paramount. And I paraphrase, discipline, which makes the soldiers of a free country reliable in battle, is not to be gained by harsh or tyrannical treatment. It is possible to impart instruction and to give commands in such a manner, in such a tone of voice, to inspire in the soldier no feeling but an intense desire to obey. We will remain an Army that preserves the trust and confidence of the American people. We are their Army, and we'll never forget that. Reflecting back to 1917, here at Fort Jackson, what will persist is that our newest soldiers will continue to mirror American society and will bring forward its cultural norms which may or may not align with the Army's. We will sustain our rich and mutually beneficial partnership with Columbia and the greater Midlands of South Carolina. When we consider the transformation from citizen to soldier, I do believe that the enduring qualities that delivered victory for the Continental Army will continue to be at the forefront, with perhaps the most important being the establishment of discipline. George Washington said that discipline is the soul of an army. And the culture of drilling imparted by von Steuben's Blue Book will gain even more value over time. Drill and ceremonies, or something like it, will remain a key method to not only honor our rich traditions, but a useful way to introduce and instill discipline, a sense of team, and the value of repetition. Building proficiency in shooting, in moving, communicating, and surviving will remain the focus. Physical and mental toughness will always remain essential. Acculturation of the new recruit to the Army profession will be what we do, as it is what we do here every single day. The importance of setting, achieving, and exceeding standards and the vital nature of attention to detail will continue to serve us well. Ultimately, building confidence in self, in team, in the Army, and the overriding recognition of service to all of that above self. So if our basic combat training is to be calibrated in response to the future nature of warfare, what do we anticipate? Well, your guess is as good as mine. But we already see many changes in our landscape driven by advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology, autonomous and semi-autonomous weapons, human performance enhancement like exoskeletal capabilities, potential for human chip interface. That's scary. Not to mention the changes in the environment, such as the growth of megacities and near-peer and peer advances in technology and the ability to target you and destroy you on that battlefield. The Army is grappling with all of this, and we're starting to hear our senior leaders talk about the need for organizational designs and capabilities reflecting an Army that can operate and must operate in a much more dispersed fashion, placing a premium and a heavy reliance on individuals and small teams. There's much more to their evolving thought, but for our purpose, this alone provides an azimuth for us to consider. Given this potential future nature of warfare, to include all those advances in technology and the capabilities that dramatically increase the lethality and battle-shaping capabilities of the individual soldier and small team, like maybe pairing nanobots and semi-autonomous mobile weapons to a single individual soldier, we may find basic combat training in its current form unable to meet the need. I can visualize a future where our newly assigned soldiers at first duty location may already have to have some of the attributes that we see in today's special operating forces, like the psychological ability to operate in a small team without the comfort of a large formation around them, and solely reliant on the high skill and tactical proficiency of their members. These are also soldiers that must be even more disciplined and reliable to purpose than we've ever seen in our Army across the board. Why? Because of the potential tactical, operational, strategic even impact of their individual actions and those of their small team. This may compel basic combat training to achieve expert level of proficiency, vice those we see today at the basic level, which obviously means much more time. Not unreasonable in my mind to start thinking 6 months, a year, more, and that's before follow-on specialty training. Units will no longer be able to absorb and manage the risk of soldiers coming to them at basic levels. Brain training and other performance enhancement may become integral components of training as we build proficiency. Training will be designed to better inoculate soldiers from the stress of high-intensity combat in dispersed small teams without the inertia and, to some, that comfort of that large team. The qualities of survival come to the forefront. Probably a much more intense focus on continual assessment to make sure we minimize vulnerabilities as we graduate our soldiers. The really good news is that we no longer have to worry about heat casualties due to all the body cooling breakthroughs. Ice sheets gone, no more. Ambulances running up and down Jackson Boulevard here, we don't hear them. And what about our future post? Well, it's more secure yet highly accessible to this community, right? That's what we want. A sportsman's haven, which is the envy of South Carolina. We still have the star bases. Construction remains an issue, but our replacement center finally, and all of our garrison offices are state of the art. All the gate access is automated with full scans, validating entry. You just slip on through, and as long as you're one of the good guys, you're coming in. Gate 4 is the epitome of local, state, and Army partnership with 6 lanes of access all the way out to the highway, and a first-class welcome center with a museum that bridges all of our visitors, even out to the National Cemetery out there along Percival Drive. And we are mosquito-free. It's unbelievable, okay? Unbelievable. Not quite sure what's going to get us there. Maybe nano bugs running, flying around, killing them all, in formation. But in Semmes Lake, renamed Johnson's Pond, all right? And it's fully stocked. It's amazing, I can fish, But all kidding aside, the real message here, Fort Jackson will remain the premier training post, forging America's Army one soldier at a time through the crucible of basic combat training, regardless of the form it takes. And will remain in prime and ready to support our Army. We will continue to challenge our assumptions and wake up every single day improving our foxhole. Fort Jackson's motto, victory starts here. Right here. Better. Reflects the sacred responsibility entrusted by the American people to transform volunteer citizens into soldiers, always soldiers, soldiers for life. Thanks for all of what you represent to this vision, what you have done, and what you will continue to do. So when I say victory starts here, you say right here. Victory starts here. Right here. Victory starts here. Right here. Okay, now for all of you uninformed, I can see there's some here in the front. You'll take your finger and you'll place it high in the sky and you'll bring it down when I say it, all right? All right, so when you say victory starts here, it's right here. Victory starts here. Right here. Okay, thank you so, so much. Hua.
Thank you, Major General Johnson. At this time, the Commanding General, Major General Johnson, will make a presentation to Mayor Benjamin and provide closing remarks.
So, Mr. Mayor, we call this Standin' Andy, all right? And obviously this is after our namesake, Andrew Jackson. And one of the things we were able to do as a part of this centennial celebration was run the 100 miles from Andrew Jackson's birthplace. I know a hotly debated item between South Carolina and North Carolina, but we settled it once and for all, okay? And we started right there and we brought it all down here, but really, Old Hickory, on behalf of this great team, this great community, thanks for all you mean to us. Okay, I think we have the closing remarks are we have a social, and I really implore everyone here not to just run out of this building, jump into your car, and head off this post to miss a cannon or something, but get over here and share some camaraderie and what it means to really be a part of this great team and community. All right, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming out today to witness the induction of 6 new members into the Fort Jackson Hall of Fame and to celebrate Fort Jackson's centennial celebration. As we talk through the last 100 years of Fort Jackson's existence, highlighting the events that have shaped Fort Jackson and the United States Army. A special thanks to Mayor Steve Benjamin and Major General John Pete Johnson for bringing our centennial lecture series to a close and educating us on the continued relationship with Columbia and the future of our Army as it pertains to initial military training. Congratulations again to our newly inducted Fort Jackson Hall of Famers. Again, thank you for your participation, and we look forward to joining you for refreshments in the adjoining room.